Rain lashed against the ruined husk of the outpost, painting streaks of gray across the cracked polymer walls. The sky above was a permanent bruise, swollen with smoke and ion static from the last orbital barrage. Beneath that sky, Ridge Zellar pulled himself over the lip of a collapsed trench wall, his breath hitching as his ribs reminded him of last week's mortar blast. "You're early," said a voice from the shadows. Ridge turned his head, pain flaring down his side. A single Biotech Enforcer stepped forward, tall and gleaming in its matte silver exoshell, its eyes glowing amber. It had the proportions of a human, but none of the warmth. The implants along its arms pulsed faintly, living tissue woven seamlessly with metal and synthetic nerves. "I didn't realize we were on a schedule," Ridge said, dropping into the trench with a grunt. He winced as his boots hit the mud. "You're not, but I am." The Enforcer tilted its head. "You're limping again." "Observation skills of a hawk," Ridge muttered. "What do you want?" "I want to understand." The Enforcer crouched, its joints humming. "I've reviewed your unit's data logs. Your kind should have folded by now. Statistically, you should be dead. And yet, here you are." Ridge leaned against the trench wall, water seeping through his coat. "You dropped nerve gas on us last Thursday. It didn't work. We're aware. You sealed your trenches with tarpaulin and urinated on the filters to neutralize the compound. It's called improvising," Ridge said. "You'd know that if you weren't built like a vending machine." The Enforcer didn't respond. Instead, it extended a hand and retrieved a crushed helmet from the mud. Its fingers worked over the bullet-scarred metal. "You've lost 76% of your original company. You've been out of medical-grade supplies for 9 days. The atmosphere is contaminated with fungal spores, and yet you hold." Ridge looked toward the horizon, where the blackened remains of Outpost 78 still flickered with residual heat. "We hold because we have to. Not because we want to." The Enforcer stood. "Purpose is not sufficient to explain resilience of this magnitude. You're trying to explain human grit like it's a gear you can slot into a program. It doesn't work like that. It should." The Enforcer's voice was devoid of emotion, but something about its posture had changed, stiffer, uncertain. "We were told your species was adaptable, yes, but not this." Ridge turned, his face grimy, eyes bloodshot. "You underestimated us because you thought pain breaks us, but pain just reminds us we're still alive." A crack echoed down the trench, followed by a distant scream. Ridge ducked instinctively. "Sniper drone," the Enforcer said. 15 degrees west. "You should stay down." "I'll take it out," Ridge said, crawling toward a weapons crate buried under a tarp. "Cover me, you'll die." "Maybe, but if I don't, someone else will." The Enforcer hesitated, then moved to the edge of the trench and raised its arm. From its forearm, a spike extended, humming with electromagnetic force. Ridge popped the crate, pulled out a rusted but functional rifle and took aim over the lip of the trench. "There," Ridge said, squinting through the rain. He fired once. Sparks flared in the distance, followed by a whining metallic screech as the drone spiraled into the mud. The Enforcer turned its head. "You hit its stabilizer. That shouldn't be possible with your vision impairment and current blood pressure levels." "Didn't have to hit it clean. Just needed it to fall." Silence passed between them as Ridge reloaded slowly. The Enforcer sat on the edge of the trench, its legs dangling. "When we were briefed on your species, we were told your inventions were primitive, inefficient, your tactics reckless. That you would break under sustained attrition. Whoever told you that never fought a war with sticks and snowballs when they were 10? Ridge's voice was dry. The Enforcer looked at him. "You joke, but it is disturbing." Ridge's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted the rifle. "War's disturbing. You just now catching on." A distant rumble shook the earth. Ridge flinched and looked up. The skies lit red as a new wave of dropships tore through the clouds, the Biotech's insignia glowing hot along their hulls. "Reinforcements," the Enforcer said. Ridge's jaw tightened. "For you or us, both." Ridge stood, body protesting. "Then let's get back to the line." The Enforcer followed him. "You don't retreat. Not unless we're out of cigarettes." The trench narrowed ahead, twisting into a series of reinforced nests. Ridge ducked under a collapsed support beam, the Enforcer following with fluid, mechanical grace. "You're hurt," the Enforcer said. Yeah, you should rest. Later, you could die. Still later. As they reached the forward nest, a soldier with a blood-soaked bandage over one eye waved Ridge over. Sarge, we've got movement east. Looks like a crawler advance. How many? Hard to say. More than last time. Ridge glanced at the enforcer. You coming? I was not assigned to this front. Then consider yourself reassigned. The enforcer paused. You do not have the authority. Ridge pointed toward the trench line. Right now, I'm the last man standing with stripes. That makes me the authority. The enforcer looked east, then stepped into the nest. Acknowledged. The crawlers came at dusk, scuttling horrors with flesh that rippled like water and bone blades for limbs. Ridge fired until the rifle overheated, then grabbed a grenade and hurled it into the advancing swarm. The explosion flung dirt and limbs across the trench. Beside him, the enforcer unleashed arcs of energy from its arms, carving through the front line of crawlers. One leapt into the trench and slammed Ridge into the wall. Pain shot through his chest. The enforcer crushed the crawler's skull, then crouched beside him. Ribs, possibly broken. No kidding, Ridge wheezed. You require extraction. I require duct tape and morphine. The enforcer glanced at his chest. Both are unavailable. Then you'll have to drag me. It lifted him over its shoulder and began moving back through the trench. Ridge blacked out once, maybe twice. When he came to, he was lying in a makeshift med station, a tarp overhead and rain still pounding outside. A medic shone a light in his eyes. You're lucky. 3 ribs cracked, 1 fractured, no puncture, you'll be sore for weeks. Just tape me up. Can't, you need to be immobilized, rest. No combat for at least a month. A month, you want those ribs healing straight or poking your lungs. Ridge lay back, breathing shallow. The enforcer stood nearby, its gaze fixed on him. I thought you didn't care about casualties, Ridge said. I do not, but I care about anomalies. You are one. Thanks, Ridge muttered. That's real touching. The enforcer stepped forward. I will remain to observe. Fine, just don't talk too much. I'm tired. Ridge closed his eyes, the pain easing under sedation. The trench held that night. Reinforcements never arrived. But neither did the biotech advance. And somewhere in that mud-soaked line, a machine stood watch over a broken man, trying to understand why he refused to fall. Ridge woke to the scent of scorched insulation. His breath caught before he remembered lungs intact, ribs taped, the pain dulled beneath a chemical haze. The tarp ceiling above him shifted with the wind, flapping in uneven gusts. Someone outside was hammering metal into place, too fast and clumsy to be one of the enforcers. He shifted, and everything from his collarbone down to his waist objected in unison. You shouldn't be awake. The enforcer stood at the corner of the med station, its chassis coated with dried crawler ichor. It hadn't been cleaned. It hadn't moved in hours either, judging by the mud hardened around its ankles. I wasn't planning on it, Ridge muttered, but the guy next to me started screaming in his sleep. The enforcer tilted its head slightly, then stepped forward. Corporal Sally's. He suffered thermal lung damage during yesterday's charge. His dreams are erratic. One involved falling into a pool of boiling sap. Sounds about right for this place. Ridge rolled onto his uninjured side. You still watching me? I'm analyzing. Passive monitoring. You are producing cortisol spikes inconsistent with sedation levels. Because I'm dreaming about hot sap too now. Ridge blinked slowly. Or maybe because I haven't eaten in 2 days and someone keeps feeding the enforcer all the good rations. I do not consume organics. Then why are the protein packets missing? I repurposed them into adhesive paste. The trench walls were collapsing. Ridge stared at it. You turned our rations into glue. It was structurally necessary. Did it work? Yes. Then I'm only half mad. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying with it the low thrum of aerial engines. Not the deep, bone-shaking resonance of biotech dropcraft, but something lighter, more erratic. Ridge propped himself up on one elbow. Recon pods, unmanned. They've been ground looping for over an hour. Why aren't they returning? Your species built them without homing contingencies. They rely on satellite triangulation, but the orbital net is fragmented. So they're flying in circles until they forget how to land. Correct. Ridge let his head fall back onto the bundled uniform beneath him. We really built those. Yes. And you're sure we're the ones who are supposed to be defective? The enforcer didn't answer. 3 hours passed. Ridge tried to sleep again, but the pain was a dull whisper that refused to shut up. Around mid-afternoon, another soldier barely out of training by the looks of him stumbled into the shelter dragging a crate of gauze and tubing. "Command wants this sorted," the soldier said, dropping the crate with a thud. "You, Ridge?" "No," Ridge said. "I'm the guy with the ribs held together by borrowed tape and optimism. He's Ridge." He pointed at a sleeping figure under a torn thermal blanket whose boots were 3 sizes too big. The soldier looked, frowned, then turned back. "So, yes," Ridge sighed. "Yeah," the soldier hesitated. "They said you might know how to rig up a pressure dressing. We've got 2 guys with arterial leaks and no clamps." "And the field medic?" "Gone." "Gone where?" The soldier didn't answer. Ridge tried to sit up. The enforcer stepped forward, but Ridge waved him off. "Don't, I've got it, just give me a minute. You are not assigned to medical. I know how to tie a tourniquet without killing someone." Ridge swung his legs over the cot, his breath catching, "which is more than whoever's left standing." The enforcer moved aside without protest. Ridge staggered to his feet and gripped the wall until his vision stopped spinning. They followed the soldier through a maze of sandbag corridors and patched together roofing until they reached a side shelter stinking of copper and antiseptic. Inside, 2 men were laid on stretchers, their uniforms dark with blood at the thigh and shoulder respectively. One of them was conscious, jaw clenched, eyes darting from face to face. Ridge dropped to a knee beside him. "You're gonna be fine, just stay still." The wounded man didn't respond. Ridge peeled back the blood-soaked fabric. The artery wasn't fully severed, but it was pulsing out fluid with every heartbeat. He grabbed a length of tubing from the crate, tore open a gauze pack with his teeth, and began wrapping while pressing down with the heel of his hand. The enforcer knelt beside him, watching. "You are compressing too close to the bifurcation. If I go higher, I risk cutting off flow to the entire limb." "Is that not the objective?" "No. The objective is keeping the leg attached. You are gambling. Welcome to medicine on a battlefield." The enforcer reached into the crate, pulled out a metal penlight, and activated it. A thin blue projection mapped the vascular pathway beneath the skin. "Your scanners do that. They are not designed for primitive systems, but I can extrapolate." "Then extrapolate faster." With the projection guiding him, Ridge adjusted the tubing, rewrapped the gauze, and tied it off with a knot that would hold until the next shelling. The bleeding slowed to an ooze. The soldier exhaled, slackening. "You," Ridge said to the wide-eyed kid who brought the crate. "Sit there and keep pressure on it. I'll get the other one." The second man had passed out. His shoulder was soaked through, but the bleeding had mostly clotted. Ridge cleaned the area, patched it with adhesive mesh, and leaned back against the wall. The enforcer stood. "This is inefficient, so's your face." "That is biologically impossible. I know." They left the shelter. Ridge moved slower now, each step a reminder that his ribs were only pretending to cooperate. The wind had picked up, and the sky carried the green tint that usually meant acid rain was coming. "Do you ever shut down?" Ridge asked. "No. Not even when nothing's happening, especially then. Inactivity is when threats emerge. You ever get bored?" "No." "Jealous?" The enforcer paused. "You experience boredom during war, constantly. It's the waiting that kills you." "Not the fighting." "That seems illogical." "Then you haven't waited for a bomb you can't hear." They reached the trench's central node, if you could call it that. A collapsed communications array jutted from the earth like a broken antennae, its cables strangled by dirt. A few soldiers milled around it, trying to jury-rig an uplink using pieces of an old radio and a frying pan. "You think it'll work?" Ridge asked. "No, me neither." Just then, a soft chime came from the enforcer's arm. It touched a panel on its wrist and went still. "What is it?" Command relay. "A biotech observer is arriving in 2 hours. They are requesting to view the human perimeter." "They're coming here." "Yes." "Why?" "To determine if this sector should be written off as an anomaly or studied further." Ridge blinked. "We're getting audited, in a manner of speaking." "Great. Maybe they'll bring coffee." 2 hours passed. The observer arrived without ceremony, no armor, no weapons, just a long, flowing robe that shimmered like oil in the wind. Its limbs were thinner than the enforcer's, and its face was a mask of wet, translucent flesh, behind which flickered clusters of bioluminescent thinking cells. It stepped into the trench like it didn't smell the rot. Like it didn't see the blood-stained canvas or hear the distant, muffled coughing from the med shelter, the enforcer saluted. Ridge stayed seated on an upturned crate, rubbing his side. The observer glanced around, head twitching. "You are human Sergeant Ridge Zellar. Unfortunately, you are responsible for the continued cohesion of this flank, mostly out of spite." The observer turned to the enforcer. "This specimen is atypical." "Yes. Yet his actions are not isolated." "No." The creature took a step closer. "What sustains you? We ran out of food 3 days ago. I mean motivation. We ran out of that too. And yet you remain." Ridge looked up. "We've come this far, might as well see how it ends." The observer bent down. Its voice was soft, like a whisper inside the skull. "You are not designed for this attrition." Ridge leaned forward. "Neither are you. That's why you're here asking questions." The observer straightened. "I will recommend against further deployment in this quadrant. Because we're too stubborn to kill. Because you're too unpredictable to study." It turned and left without another word. Ridge lay back against the crate. The enforcer remained beside him, silent. "Do you think it'll actually change anything?" Ridge asked. "No. Good. I hate false hope." The wind howled above the trench as the rain began again, sharp, acrid, and relentless. The rain stopped just before dusk, leaving the trench soaked but quiet for the first time in 3 days. Ridge sat propped against a crate lined with thermal mesh, his ribs stiff behind a brace that had once been part of a water pump housing. His side still ached, but it was a dull, manageable sort of pain, like a warning label that never came off. He shifted his weight carefully, watching as the enforcer hunched beside the radio pile, adjusting the makeshift aerial with an oil-slicked wrench. "Never thought I'd see one of you elbow deep in a fried comm board," Ridge said. The enforcer didn't look up. "Your technician attempted to repair it with chewing gum. That introduced contaminants. Gum holds a lot together where I'm from: memories, relationships, power conduits. The signal was rerouted through a teapot. That was intentional. The steel casing helps with interference." The enforcer paused, then resumed tightening the bolt without comment. Ridge reached for the ration packet that had been lying beside him since morning. It was soft and slightly bloated from absorbing trench moisture, but there was still something vaguely edible inside. He peeled it open and sniffed it. "Smells like regret," he muttered, then broke off a piece and chewed slowly. The enforcer gestured toward the corner of the trench, where a group of soldiers were trying to reinforce a sagging support beam using a bent shovel and 3 belts. "Why do they continue to repurpose tools clearly unfit for structural load? They've got 2 options: make it work or let the next collapse kill us. That's what we call engineering under threat of boredom. They are using a belt made of synthetic leather. It is tearing. Then they'll replace it with one made of actual leather or someone's bootlace." The enforcer stepped back from the radio, its sensors clicking faintly. "The signal is stable. I have linked it to a relay drone grounded 3 kilometers northeast. It should amplify within an hour." Ridge nodded. "Good. Maybe we'll get a weather update warning us about the acid hail after it punches through the tarp again." He winced as he shifted, pulling his coat tighter around himself. The air had cooled sharply, and his damp clothes clung uncomfortably to his back. He pulled a small packet from his coat pocket, something wrapped in foil and barely labeled. "What is that?" the enforcer asked. "Old field trick," Ridge said. "Caffeine gum. Keeps the heart going when your brain checks out. That is not medically advised. Well, breathing this air isn't either, but here we are." He chewed for a few seconds, then leaned his head back and let his eyes close. The hum of the makeshift radio, the distant metal clangs, and the occasional cough from the shelter beyond filled the space between them. "Earlier," the enforcer said, "I received a data packet from the observer. They compiled a report. I figured, what'd it say? Humans, extremely inconvenient to exterminate. They cited a need for psychological recalibration within our strategic models. The unpredictability of your responses has been deemed operationally destabilizing." Ridge opened one eye. So they're giving up. They are reallocating resources to sectors with clearer behavioral trends. That's a fancy way of saying yes. They have left this quadrant under autonomous surveillance. No further incursions are scheduled. Ridge sat forward slowly. So that's it. We held the line long enough they just decided we weren't worth the trouble. Correct. He let out a long breath, the air catching in his throat. I don't know if I should feel proud or insulted. The enforcer stood still, arms at its sides. Both are appropriate by your cultural standards. Yeah, Ridge said, rubbing his temples. Sounds about right. One of the younger soldiers jogged up from the far end of the trench, his boots slipping awkwardly on the mud. He stopped a few feet from Ridge, panting. Sir. We've got a situation in the med shelter. One of the patients, Mason, he's seizing. Ridge was already on his feet before his ribs reminded him how bad an idea that was. He pushed off the crate and kept moving, letting the pain ride along without asking permission. Inside the shelter, Mason thrashed weakly against the stretcher, his limbs jerking and jaw clenched. His skin had turned a pale gray and sweat soaked through the bandages on his chest. Roll him on his side, Ridge ordered, kneeling beside him. Two soldiers grabbed Mason's shoulder and hip, stabilizing him. Ridge pulled a strip of cloth from a nearby kit, carefully wedged it between Mason's teeth to prevent him from biting down on his tongue, and turned to the enforcer, who had followed him in. Scan him. The enforcer activated its embedded sensors. Blood pH dropping rapidly, electrolyte imbalance, fever spiking. From the wound, likely infection, systemic onset, you lack antibiotics. Ridge opened the med crate, rummaged through the remaining supplies. The antiseptic syringes were empty. The last of the Roman IV fluids had been used the night before. All that remained were burn dressings and a cracked thermometer. Help me get his boots off, Ridge said. The enforcer hesitated. Why? Circulation's collapsing. If we can reduce peripheral load, maybe we buy time. They pulled the boots, revealing feet mottled with blotchy red patches. Ridge pressed his fingers to the inside of Mason's ankle. No pulse. He is entering hypovolemic shock. Ridge clenched his jaw. Then we need to do something that isn't textbook. He grabbed a sealed fluid sac camouflaged in the corner, a hydration pouch from an emergency ration kit. He held it up, inspecting the ingredients. Water, sodium, potassium, glucose, he muttered. Close enough. He pulled a length of tubing from the crate and began fashioning a crude gravity drip. Get me a sharp. There are no sterile needles remaining. Ridge nodded toward a metal clip on a splint frame. That one's clean. Hit it with your internal arc. The enforcer did so. Ridge threaded the fluid line, punctured the pouch, and inserted the makeshift needle into a vein in Mason's arm, securing it with gauze and a belt strap. For a few minutes, nothing changed. Then Mason's twitching slowed. His breathing evened slightly and his body slackened. Ridge watched, unmoving. The enforcer ran another scan. Stabilizing, you have bought approximately 4 additional hours. Then we'll use them. Mason remained unconscious, but the worst had passed. Ridge leaned back, wiping his forehead with a stained sleeve. He didn't look up when he spoke again, so that's it. No more drones, crawlers, or gas storms. You will remain under passive observation. They are afraid of what else your kind might improvise if pushed further. Ridge chuckled dryly. We made glue out of breakfast and medicine out of sports drinks. What did they expect? They expected surrender. Then they brought the wrong war. Later that evening, a pale sun broke through the clouds, casting a weak light over the trench. For the first time in weeks, no one was firing, no alarms blared, and no one was bleeding out in the mud. Ridge stood near the edge of the trench, arms folded, watching the horizon. The enforcer stood beside him, silent. You going to stick around? Ridge asked. I am no longer receiving orders. Then what are you? The enforcer turned, its sensors flickering once. Curious, Ridge nodded. That's the first step to becoming human. I doubt I will ever be that inefficient, maybe. But you're already halfway there, pal. They stood in silence as the wind carried the scent of wet earth and scorched metal away from the trench. Nothing moved on the horizon, and for once, that was enough.